The sky had been crying all day. The streets of Willowbrook shimmered with reflections of neon lights from the small corner shops. Cars hissed past, splashing muddy water onto the sidewalks. Clara Hayes hurried under her umbrella, her heels tapping sharply against the wet pavement. She was late for a meeting, but her eyes caught something. Someone standing under the overhang of the bakery. A boy, no older than 9. He was holding a paper bag close to his chest, his hair plastered to his forehead. But what made Clara stop was his feet. Bare, small toes curling against the wet concrete, red from the cold. For a second, Clara thought maybe he was waiting for someone, maybe he had just forgotten his shoes. But when a group of kids passed, laughing at him, the boy's shoulders tensed like he had heard it all before. Something deep in her chest ached. She remembered being that kid once, the one people looked at like a problem, not a person. She lowered her umbrella and walked toward him. "Where are your shoes?" she asked softly. The boy didn't look at her. "Don't have any." Clara wasn't in the habit of talking to strangers' children. She'd been raised to mind her own business. But the way the boy said those 3 words, there was no pity in his voice, just acceptance. Like life had taught him not to expect better. "Wait here," she told him. He flinched at her tone, too sharp, too much like an order. She softened her voice. "I'll be back in a minute, okay?" He hesitated, then gave the smallest nod. Clara darted into the shoe store next door, ignoring the receptionist's glance at her dripping hair. 10 minutes later, she stepped out holding a box, brand new sneakers, soft inside, thick soles. When she knelt in front of the boy, he looked at the box like it was a trick. "They're yours," she said. It took coaxing, but finally, the boy put the shoes on. His toes disappeared into the warmth, and Clara saw it. The smallest flicker of a smile, like a candle fighting against the wind. "They fit?" she asked. He nodded. "What's your name?" "Eli." "Nice to meet you, Eli." "I'm Clara." He mumbled a thank you so quiet she almost missed it, then turned to leave. Clara assumed he'd run home and tell his parents about the stranger who had helped him. She imagined the mother's relief, maybe even a call of thanks. She couldn't have been more wrong. That evening, Clara decided to check. The boy had headed toward Maple Street earlier, and she knew the neighborhood. Run down, but not dangerous. She found his house easily. Paint peeling, one shutter hanging loose, a rustabike lying on the lawn. When she knocked, the door opened to a woman in her 30s. Her hair pulled back so tight it seemed to pull the anger into her face. "You Clara?" the woman asked sharply. "Yes, I met your son earlier." The woman's eyes cut like glass. "You give him those shoes?" "Yes, I just thought." "Don't do that again." Clara stood frozen. "I'm sorry, did I offend you?" "You don't know what you've done," the woman said, her voice low but shaking. Then she slammed the door. Clara stood on the porch, rain dripping from her hair, heart pounding. She had expected gratitude, maybe even relief. But instead, she felt like she'd walked into a story she didn't understand. The next day, Clara saw Eli again, this time at the corner store. The sneakers were gone. He was barefoot again. "Eli," she whispered, "where are your shoes?" He looked around before answering. "Can't keep him." That's when she noticed it. A bruise just under his sleeve, dark against the skin. Something twisted in her stomach. She wanted to ask questions, but Eli grabbed his paper bag and ran before she could say a word. That night, Clara lay in bed staring at the ceiling. She knew that feeling, having something good taken away, because someone else thought you didn't deserve it. She remembered her own mother throwing away a brand new coat someone had given her when she was 8. "We don't take charity," she had said. But deep down, Clara knew it wasn't pride. It was control. Clara told herself she'd let it go. Eli wasn't her responsibility. But the image of his bare feet in the rain haunted her. On Saturday, she drove by his house again. That's when she saw him, not with his mother, but with a tall, heavy-set man she didn't recognize. The man's grip on Eli's shoulder was too tight, his voice too sharp. And then Clara noticed. The man was Mr. Dalton, the wealthiest man in town. Later that day, Clara asked the shopkeeper about Dalton. The woman lowered her voice. Don't get involved with him. Clara, he owns half this town, and the other half owes him. If you're smart, you'll stay out of whatever's going on with that boy. But Clara had never been good at staying out of things that mattered. That evening, as Clara walked her car, a black sedan slowed beside her. The tinted window rolled down, and a deep voice said, "You looking for trouble, Miss Hayes? Because you found it." The car drove off before she could respond, but her hands were shaking. Something told her Eli's bare feet were only the beginning of a much darker story. Clara spent Sunday trying to distract herself with chores, but every time she closed her eyes, she saw Eli standing in the rain, toes numb, clutching that paper bag like it was a lifeline. She couldn't get rid of the sound of Mr. Dalton's voice either, smooth, confident, and threatening all at once. By nightfall, she decided she would speak to Eli again. She'd wait until he was alone. On Monday afternoon, she found him sitting behind the old library, drawing shapes in the dirt with a stick. The sneakers she'd bought were nowhere in sight. "Eli," she said gently, "what happened to the shoes?" He froze and whispered they weren't mine to keep. "Why not?" His eyes darted toward the street. "'Cause he said so." "Who's he?" Clara asked. Eli bit his lip. "Don't matter. If I say, it'll be worse." A cold heaviness settled over her. She wanted to press him, but the look in his eyes told her this wasn't just a stubborn child. It was fear. Real, bone-deep fear. She gave him a snack from her bag. "You ever need help, you find me. Anywhere, anytime. Understand?" He nodded, but she could tell he didn't believe help was possible. The next day at work, Clara got a call from the head office. "Clara, a complaint's been filed against you," her boss said. "It's about harassing a local family. You need to stop whatever you're doing in your personal time." She felt the blood drain from her face. Only one person could have done that. Clara sat in her office, staring at the blinds, the city street a blur outside. If Dalton was already targeting her job, she needed to be smart. But she also knew something else. When powerful people wanted you silent, it usually meant you were close to the truth. That evening, she parked down the street from Eli's house. She told herself she was only there to check if he was okay. The front door opened. Eli stepped out, carrying a heavy garbage bag. Dalton was standing on the porch, speaking to Eli's mother in low, tense tones. Eli's head was down, but Clara noticed something. His lip was split, against her better judgment. Clara got out of the car and walked up the sidewalk. Dalton turned before she could speak. "Ms. Hayes, didn't I warn you?" Eli's mother looked between them, eyes full of something Clara couldn't read. Fear? Shame? "I'm here to make sure he's okay," Clara said. Dalton smiled thinly. "He's fine. Go home." Eli opened his mouth like he wanted to speak, but Dalton's hand landed on his shoulder, a casual gesture to anyone else. But Clara forced herself to walk away. She hated herself for it, but she knew, right now, going head-to-head with Dalton would only hurt Eli more. The next morning, Clara found an envelope under her windshield wiper. Inside was a crumpled note, written in a shaky hand. "Meet me behind the diner, after dark. Come alone. M." She didn't know who M was, but something told her this was connected to Eli. At 9 p.m., Clara waited behind the diner, the hum of the fridge units filling the air. A woman in a faded hoodie stepped out from the shadows. It was Eli's mother. "You need to stop buying him things," she said quickly. "Why?" "Because Dalton said so." Clara asked, the woman's eyes filled with tears. "Because every time someone's kind to him, Dalton takes it out on him. And on me." Clara's heart pounded. The pieces were starting to fall into place. But she still didn't know why. Clara stared at Eli's mother, the street lamp throwing long shadows across her face. "Why does Dalton care so much about what happens to Eli?" Clara asked. The woman swallowed hard. "Because Eli's not just my son. He's someone Dalton needs to control." The words were heavy, but before Clara could press further, the woman turned and walked away, leaving the smell of cigarette smoke and rain in the air. That night, Clara lay awake, running through possibilities. A debt? A family connection? Something worse? Every time she thought about backing off, she remembered Eli's bare, bruised feet in the rain and Dalton's smug smile. Backing off wasn't an option anymore. The next day, she found Eli sitting at the back of the park, away from the other kids. "Your mom talked to me last night," Clara said gently. His eyes widened. "You shouldn't have done that." "Eli, I just want to understand." He looked down at his hands. "Dalton says if I act like I need help, people will get hurt. So I'm not allowed to have things other kids give me, or talk to people too much." While Eli spoke, his fingers traced a shape in the dirt, a rough sketch of a man's face. Clara recognized the square jaw, the heavy brow. "Dalton, you draw him a lot?" she asked. Eli quickly smeared the picture away. "Not supposed to." 2 days later, Clara came out of work to find her car window smashed. The only thing missing was her work bag. Inside it, the small notebook where she'd written everything she learned about Eli and Dalton. The police filed a report, but the officer's shrug told her he didn't expect much. People like Dalton, they're untouchable. Clara's jaw clenched. "Not forever," she said. Clara returned to the diner where she'd met Eli's mother. This time, she sat inside, nursing a coffee and pretending to read. A man in a delivery uniform slid into the booth across from her without asking. "You're the one asking about the kid," he said. "Who are you?" Clara asked. "Someone who's seen Dalton do things that'd ruin him, if you can prove it." The delivery man leaned in. "There's a storage unit out by the old train yard. Dalton visits once a month. Never brings anyone. Herd whispers it's got stuff he can't keep in his house." "What kind of stuff?" Clara asked. He shook his head. "The kind that explains why he's so interested in a boy that's not his." Before she could act on the lead, Clara ran into Eli after school. He looked pale. "Don't go near him," he whispered. "He knows you're trying to find things. He said bad things happen to people who dig too much." Clara knelt, so her eyes were level with his. Bad things already happen when no one digs at all. That weekend, Clara drove to the train yard. The air was thick with the smell of rust and oil. She found the storage units, rows of padlock doors. She wrote down the unit number Dalton had been seen visiting, 27B. Her hands shook as she snapped a photo. If she could just find a way inside. As she turned to leave, she felt it. Someone watching. From the corner of the yard, a figure in a black coat stood perfectly still, face hidden in shadow. When she blinked, he was gone. Clara's stomach sank. Dalton knew she'd been here. And this time, he wasn't just going to warn her. 2 nights after the train yard, Clara's phone rang at 1:14 a.m. She almost didn't answer until she saw the caller ID. Unknown. A trembling voice came through. "It's Eli's mom. He's gone." Clara sat up straight. "What do you mean gone?" "Dalton came tonight. Said he's taking Eli for a few days. I couldn't stop him." Clara called the police, but the officer on duty said there was no custody order to violate. Legally, they couldn't interfere. "He's not Dalton's son," Clara argued. The officer sighed. "Maybe not on paper, but Dalton's got people who'll swear otherwise." Clara hung up, her hands cold. She had one option left: find Dalton herself. The only lead she had was the storage unit. If Dalton had taken Eli there, she'd need proof before confronting him. Clara borrowed a friend's car and returned to the train yard at dawn. The mist clung to ground like it was trying to hide her. She found 27B again. This time, the padlock hung open. The air inside was thick with the smell of damp paper and dust. Boxes were stacked to the ceiling, each labeled with dates going back more than a decade. In the center, on a small table, sat a photo frame. Clara's breath caught. It was a picture of Eli, years younger, standing beside a man she didn't recognize. Dalton was in the background, watching. She opened one of the boxes. Inside were ledgers, receipts, and signed agreements. Names she recognized, town officials, business owners, were next to amounts of money. And on one page, her heart stopped. Payment for Eli custody arrangement. It wasn't charity Dalton was offering Eli's mom. It was ownership. Years ago, desperate for money, She had signed something she thought was temporary. Dalton had been using it as leverage ever since, controlling both her and Eli. If this got out, Dalton would be finished. Clara stuffed the ledger into her bag and turned to leave, only to find Dalton blocking the doorway. "Looking for something?" he asked, voice smooth as silk. Her mouth went dry. "Eli, where is he?" Dalton smiled without warmth. "Safe. For now." Dalton stepped inside, closing the distance between them. "You give me that ledger and you walk away. Keep it, and you'll wish you'd never cared about that boy." Clara's fingers tightened around the bag. "You're afraid of this getting out." Dalton's eyes flashed. "You don't know who you're dealing with." Before Dalton could move, Clara swung a heavy box toward him, knocking him back. She bolted out of the storage unit, heart pounding, and ran to her car. She didn't stop until she was halfway across town. The ledger lay on the seat beside her, the weight of it both terrifying and liberating. That night, Clara made copies of every page and sent them anonymously to 3 different journalists she knew. She also left a message for Eli's mom. "Hold on, this ends soon." She didn't know if Dalton would come for her before the story broke. But for the first time, she felt like the balance of power was starting to shift. The next morning, Clara expected some sign that her message to journalists had worked. A headline, a phone call, anything. But the world outside her window looked the same. No sirens, no news vans. Just quiet. Too quiet. She checked her phone. No calls. No texts. That silence felt dangerous. At 10 a.m., her office building went into lockdown. Her boss called her in, looking pale. "Clara, Dalton's accusing you of theft and corporate espionage. He has witnesses. You need to leave the premises." Clara realized what was happening. Dalton was trying to discredit her before the story could break. As she packed her desk, her phone buzzed. It was a message from one of the journalists. "The story's going live at noon. Brace yourself." Clara's pulse quickened. She walked out of the building without a word, every step carrying the weight of what was coming. At exactly 12 p.m., her phone exploded with notifications. Headline: Leaked documents expose town power broker's exploitation scheme. Dalton's name was everywhere, along with photocopies of the ledger. The article detailed how he'd trapped vulnerable families into lifelong dependency, controlling them through custody agreements and financial blackmail. And Eli's name wasn't mentioned, but Clara knew the world was finally seeing the monster he was. By mid-afternoon, Willowbrook was buzzing. Dalton's usual allies were suddenly unavailable for comment. Business owners took down his sponsorship plaques. The mayor's office issued a statement promising a full investigation. For the first time, Dalton wasn't untouchable. That evening, Eli's mother called Clara. Her voice was shaking, but not with fear. He dropped Eli off, didn't say a word, just drove away. Clara exhaled slowly. He's free now. There was a long pause. Then Eli's mom whispered, "Thank you." Clara went to see Eli the next day. He was on the porch, wearing a pair of well-worn sneakers. Not new, but his. When he saw her, he grinned. "You didn't stop." "Neither did you," she said. 2 weeks later, Dalton was arrested on charges of fraud, coercion, and illegal custody agreements. The images of him in handcuffs spread faster than any of his threats ever had. Clara didn't go to the trial. She didn't need to. Justice was already in motion. One afternoon, Eli knocked on Clara's door, holding a shoebox. "There for you," he said, grinning. She opened it to find the sneakers she had bought him on that rainy day. Still a little worn, but clean. "I can keep things now," he said. "But I wanted you to have these, so you know it mattered." Months later, Willowbrook felt different. Dalton's empire was gone. Families were coming forward with their own stories, and Eli was just another kid at school, with shoes, friends, and a smile that came easier now. Clara knew she hadn't fixed everything, but she had learned something she'd carry forever. Kindness isn't about what you give. It's about standing by someone when giving costs you everything. And sometimes the smallest act, like buying a boy a pair of shoes, is the first step toward breaking the chains that bind an entire life.